Let's talk about how to organize a collaborative research/open innovation project for your company. Obviously, there is no one-size-fits-all solution, no single framework that would work for every company, every case, because, well, everyone works differently. But I'm going to share my knowledge of someone who's been organizing such projects as an intermediary, as a facilitator for quite some time. I've been working a lot with collaborative competitions, which is actually more challenging to organize than just a pure collaborative project with another organization. At my company, Disruptive, we still do competitions in the form of a hackathon now, but this is not what I will be talking about today, not hackathons, not competitions. Today, I want to focus on a more long-term form of collaborative projects, something that can last for months and even years in some cases, and something that a lot of companies are involved in. In my practice, I've been working mostly with universities, but also with startups and different research organizations, and the framework that I want to propose is quite general, so you can really adjust it to your needs and to your specific projects and to your specific collaborative partners. I will be talking mostly about research projects, like technical scientific projects, because this is where my passion and expertise lies. But I believe that business challenges is pretty much the same thing, so you can use this framework for your business challenges as well. There is also one thing I want to mention. I have prepared a basic canvas for your collaborative project, something to start with, to get ready for the process. But I'm going to talk about this Canva a little bit more at the very end of the video. Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Lisa and I've been working for years on organizing collaborative university competitions for world well-known companies to solve their extreme innovation challenges, and now I continue my journey with the goal to foster innovation by helping different parties of the innovation process collaborate and co-create. On this channel, I explore collaboration projects for innovation management, share my experience in managing these projects and processes, and uncover strategies for making collaboration efforts more effective. So let's start. And the very first thing that I always mention all the time is about identifying the challenge, identifying the problem that you're trying to solve. And it's a very important step because everything, literally the whole process, depends on the challenge. It's going to influence all your decisions, your choices about the format, how long the project is going to take, who you're going to invite for collaboration, and other things as well. And I always say, when it comes to defining, identifying the right challenge, I believe that the problem that you're going to use for such projects should be of strategic importance for your company, and it should be ambitious enough and well defined. Those are really important criteria you must follow to come up with a good challenge to solve during your collaborative innovation project. And the reason for that is that, of course, you will invest quite some time, quite some money, and quite some effort into this project, more than you usually invest in your internal R&D activities, okay? So you need to make sure that you are not wasting the resources on something that you can really do alone with your internal team. You need to think of something really big and really important, something that will bring you quite some revenue. But identifying the challenge is not the only thing, it's not just it. It's not enough. You really need to see the connection between the problem that you have defined and how this specific problem is going to influence the whole collaboration process. For example, when we conduct a collaborative innovation project, we of course keep in mind that we work on an innovation. And innovation is the result of the process, a solution to your problem. And of course, we can develop incremental innovations or radical innovations. So obviously, incremental innovation is when you're just trying to improve your current product. You're not planning to come up with something entirely new, an entirely new product. You just want to make your current solution better. And this is what most companies do on a regular basis, working with what they have. And I would say that this task is relatively simple, okay? At least in terms of understanding what exactly you need. And this is actually already a great thing. But then we also have radical innovation. And developing radical innovation is more complex, complicated challenge. Often you're looking for something that you do not fully understand, And I want to make a remark here. Sometimes what you're trying to do is just improving your current product. You're not planning to launch anything new. You just need this improvement. But sometimes this small improvement can be quite a tough challenge. It can be a complicated problem to solve. And I do believe that these projects, when you're trying to find a solution to a complex, difficult to solve problem that would still just give an incremental change, it still might be closer to developing a radical innovation than to developing an incremental one. And again, this is just something for you to keep in mind because it will influence your decision about the project. For example, you've been trying to solve this small thing for a while. You've been trying to do it with your internal team. You've been trying to find the solution for this really incremental problem, but you haven't been successful so far. And that's why you decided to go with a collaborative project to find someone to help you. Yeah, here I would also consider such project as the project and just similar to the project when you're trying to find a radical innovation. And so when you identify the problem that you want to take for this project, you need to understand which category your challenge belongs to. Is it the first one? Is it an incremental innovation with a relatively simple problem? Or the second category, either or a radical innovation or an incremental one with a very complex problem to solve. This is, again, something to keep in mind because it's gonna dictate how many teams you need to involve, for example, and we will get to this point later when we talk about different factors. Now, apart from defining the challenge for your collaborative research project, what you also need to understand is what exactly you want to get at the end of the process, what solution and what characteristics it's going to have. Basically, you need to come up with a list of requirements, a list of criteria for solutions that you expect. You need to know which criteria the final result should meet. Like, for example, you are developing a new material and you need to know what properties it should have. Should it biodegrade in 3 months? Under what conditions? Which standards should it meet? All these important points, you need to include them, you need to include them in the list of your criteria. And you have to do it before the project starts. And you cannot change these criteria in the middle of the process. So you need to think about them really carefully. And I highly recommend you to spend enough time thinking about these criteria of what you need to get at the end. Because if you're going to change them right in the middle of the project, well, most likely you're going to fail, unfortunately. Just something to remember. And it's more or less easy to define criteria for an incremental innovation because basically you just want to improve your current product. You know what you need to get at the end. For radical innovations, something entirely new, I would suggest being a little bit more open. Don't set very strict requirements. And first of all, it is very unlikely that you'll get the ideal solution that you have in your mind. With radical innovations and difficult challenges, it's just more difficult to get the result, to create exactly what you envision. So just be ready that you won't get the perfect solution. And this is totally fine. This is totally okay. In most cases, what you need to get is at least some prototypes to work with to then see and scale them up later in the process. Still, Still, for radical innovations, mention the criteria, include numbers, include details about the properties that you want to see in the final solution. You just need something good enough to start with, something you can finalize and tweak later. And as we're talking about all these different criteria and requirements for the final solutions, I believe that you must also understand what technology readiness level or TRL you are aiming for. And you need to define this at the very beginning, and it should be a part of your criteria. You also need to define the tests you want to perform at the end of the project, what exactly you want to check, which trials you want to conduct, and this should also be part of like your criteria list, maybe not the criteria list, but something in addition that you're going to show to your collaboration partners, like to mention what exactly you're going to see and what exactly you're going to test at the very end of the process. Because obviously you want to get the solution that can go to the market, that you can scale up, but sometimes it might be quite difficult to achieve within one single project with one single partner, or like even with many partners. It might be just difficult, and maybe sometimes you have capabilities in your team to do the scale up and you do not need the help of any like third parties right now with the scale up. So maybe you want just to have some prototypes, again, something that can be, like tested in the lab, something that you can reproduce in the lab, and only then, like as the next stage, move to, pilot plants, for example. One more point that I want to add here: if you are working with an intermediary company that helps you find partners and manage the collaboration, they should help you to define the challenge and come up with the criteria and advise you on whether certain things make sense to include. They're going to help you review all the details and the information that you're going to share. They will do this together with you, and it should make the process easier for you. Well, hopefully it's going to make the process easier for you. One more thing, I just want to admit that defining the right challenge to solve is one of the biggest issues in open innovation projects. So don't really think of it as it's an easy task and you kind of already have this challenge. You need to dedicate enough time. You need to think it through, because again, it will influence the whole process and it might cost you a lot of money and efforts and resources if you define it wrong. So let's imagine that you have defined the challenge, the criteria, you understand what you want to get at the end of the process. And now another point to think about when you are getting ready for your collaborative innovation project is the information that you are ready to share with your collaboration partners. Because regardless of whether you're working on a radical or incremental innovation, you will need to provide some information about your current product, technology, and processes to your partners. And you need to decide how open you're willing to be and what exactly you're ready to share with your partners. Of course, the more you share, the better and easier it will be for your partners to come up with the right solution, with the solution that you want to get, because they will be aware of your constraints and requirements, and it's easier to understand each other, when you just know what you get, what you already have, what you have tried in the past maybe. And I think that this point is especially important for incremental innovations. When you're working on improving an existing product, you are not looking for something new. The solution should perfectly fit with what you already have. So you will need to open up a bit. Of course, you will not share everything, and there is no need in it. And even for the information that you are ready to share, you need to understand what you want to mention before the process starts, before any agreements are signed, before, of course, a non-disclosure agreement is signed. and what you're going to open only when your partner signs an NDA. And that's totally fine. I think it's okay to start by sharing just enough to describe the challenge and the criteria, and then you can open up a little bit more once you find a confidential partner to work with. So now, once you have defined your challenge, your criteria, and information that you are ready to share, once you understand the complexity of the project, well, we can move to other important aspects like who should be potential partners for your project, who you need to work with to make magic happen. And first of all, what you need to understand is what kind of expertise you need for the project, what you're missing, what technologies and knowledge your team does not have, and what kind of partner would be the best fit. Though it's not always obvious what you really should go for, especially like with radical innovation. It's not always clear what technologies you need, you know what I mean? But let's talk more about partners. And when you're thinking about partners and who you want to involve, I would suggest that in the back of your mind, you keep how much money you're ready to invest and how much time you're ready to spend to develop a solution. It's very difficult to explain these things separately because everything is kind of intertwined, and the type of the partner that would work for you best really depends on the sources that you have, of course, and that you're ready to invest. In general, a company can work with a university, with a startup, with another company, a lab, a research institute, or even individuals. Sometimes individuals have ideas that can help you, but let's imagine that you do not have a lot of time for this project. You want to complete it as soon as possible. In most cases, that's the case. And for example, it's like something relatively simple, and maybe it's an incremental innovation. Then maybe working with a university might not be the best idea, and maybe it's better to find some research institutions or, companies or startups, teams that might already have what you need, at least an initial version of it. Then it's also good to think about how many partners you need. Do you want to work only with one team, or would you rather enjoy the results of collaboration with a number of partners? And then you might invite all the different organizations to the project, or a couple of, for example, again, you can invite a couple of university teams to work on the project as well. So there is actually research on this topic that shows that how the number of partners should vary depending on the type of innovation that you are working on. For incremental innovations, it's better to invite fewer partners with whom you have a really good bond, a deep connection. And I think we can talk here about the teams that maybe you have worked with before. If you have never worked with anyone, it's okay. But if you have, then it's just going to be easier to collaborate with them. And it's good if your partner knows your product as best as they can for an incremental innovation, of course. It's good if they know your processes and materials that you use, and they can adjust their solutions to your needs. And there is really no need to overcomplicate things in this case. But of course, you can start working with someone from scratch, even for an incremental project, that's fine too. You need to find someone who works with your specific technology, with your area. And I would recommend here going for a partner that is located close to you, somewhere in your area, or at least in the same country. It just makes collaboration easier. Now, for radical innovations or incremental but very complex challenges, it makes sense to invite more partners, more diverse partners, of course, because this gives you access to more ideas, more technologies, and a broader knowledge base, of course. Because collaborating with a few different organizations can really help you find these unconventional solutions. However, finding these organizations might not be that easy, because you might not exactly know who you need and which technologies and knowledge these potential partners should possess. With such challenges, just going the way you go with incremental innovations, working with the teams from the same area and using technologies you use is not going to bring you the best results. I mean, it can, but still, here I would definitely combine teams. And I would bring, and this is not that that's how we usually do. We are bringing teams, not only the ones that work on the same technology as yours, but also teams from adjacent areas. Now, to find such areas, to identify where you should look for them, I would think about your technology on a very basic level. How can you explain it on a very basic level? Just to give you an example, we're talking about epoxy resins, and your challenge is to find a solution to recycle epoxy resin to get a material that you could reuse for other products. We know that thermosets consist of polymer chains that are cross-linked, meaning the chains are bonded to form a rigid three-dimensional network. And what you need is to make these chains not cross-linked again. So this is just a very kind of basic understanding of what you're working on, and what you need to do is think about other areas where this basic understanding would work. So we can talk about other materials in which molecules have strong bonds, but for which we have solutions, or at least some ideas of solutions. And think about, experts working on different methods of recycling. Do not focus on one team only. Invite different and see how you can combine their solutions. With such types of problems, you want to go somewhere into another area, because the solution should and will be unconventional. So you want to look for unconventional knowledge and technologies that you know nothing about. Now, obviously, if you have a project intermediary, they should help you with that, if you have one, Now, the next point I want to touch a little bit is about competition between collaborative partners. And I have to talk about this one, because as I have mentioned, I have this experience working with competitions and hackathons that we do now. And the model that I've been working with for another company was about collaboration, but it's also about competition, of course. And in my opinion, this is a great way to do an open innovation project, because I really think that organizing a competition and inviting a number of research partners who all get the same task can be very beneficial, because we all know that competition drives progress. We all compete and we all try to achieve more because we want to win. But I will be honest, it is quite complicated to run such a project. But still, this is something that you can consider as well, But I believe that organizing a competition is a topic for another conversation. Now, apart from your main collaboration partners, you might also want to bring in other types of partners. For example, we can talk about testing laboratories, we can talk about supply chain partners, independent experts or consultants, because sometimes it is really helpful to invite a third-party expert, even if they are not developing the technology together with you. They could help you to evaluate ideas, assess feasibility, or contribute to decision making. This is especially useful for radical innovation projects or highly complex challenges. For simpler, incremental projects, you might not need external experts. Your internal team probably has all the knowledge required and they can make a decision. But for more difficult challenges, I would highly recommend involving someone external who brings a fresh perspective, even a professor from the university that is not actively participating in technical development, he or she can be an amazing resource to help steer your decisions. Moreover, they can help to make the right choices, as your team might and probably will get biased during the project. Another thing to consider once you understand more or less who your partners would be is how you are going to collaborate. Will it be a fully remote project? Will it be hybrid? And I highly recommend meeting in person with your partners at least occasionally. Yes, it may require some travel and extra expenses, but trust me, it's absolutely worth it. Meeting face to face helps build trust, which is crucial in any collaborative project. And in my experience, the biggest breakthroughs, especially when we're talking about developing some radical innovation, often happen during these offline sessions when people just get together and brainstorm in the same room, and not only during these official brainstorming meetings, but when they have parties, when they casually talk to each other, Now, I have to talk a little bit about money and time, and I believe it is really important to define, or at least not to define, maybe like you shouldn't set it in stone, but to understand when you want to start and when you want to finish the project. You don't want to do it forever, right? This can happen, especially when working with universities sometimes. They are not really used to operating under strict timelines, but you need to have this idea of approximately how much time you want to spend on your challenge. And of course, the duration of the project will depend on the type of the challenge, of the type of the problem you're trying to solve. Some projects, they can be done in a couple of weeks, others in a few months, and some of them may take years. And there is no really universal answer here. It really depends, but it's good to set some realistic standards. In such projects, you might want to listen to your partners and the time frame that they offer. And again, as I mentioned before, these frames might also influence your choices of partners. Maybe you will find someone who can really do the project quicker than the other party. And another thing about time and the case when you plan to work with the university actually is that you need to be considerate of their timing and things like the end of the semester, exams, holidays, because it will eventually influence your project. If the university team is busy with exams, they won't be able to help you. And such things like exams and stuff like that, they won't influence projects that are going to last for years, for example, but they will definitely influence shorter projects. So this is something just to keep in mind. Now let's talk about money a little bit and the budget. How much are you ready to invest in this project? This is something that you need to carefully consider. And I will be honest with you, I'm not a financial expert, and this is something that you should discuss with your financial team. They're going to help you evaluate potential return on investment and assess whether the project makes sense financially. Just some things to remember. When you calculate your budget, don't forget to include money you will be paying to your partners, additional services that you might need during the project infrastructure, and all the different trips that you might need to take. We'll talk about the project infrastructure later, but yeah, just keep that in mind. That said, I know that there are many ways companies allocate and manage their R&D budgets. Of course, it's up to you to define yours. And again, some organizations know for sure how much their services cost. I'm mostly talking about like some service companies that do research for a living. And in other cases, like universities, you might suggest your budget. Obviously, if you are limited in resources, it might be difficult to get top teams on board. However, I would still recommend you approach every team and individual you feel might help you with your problem. Because money is important, but often curiosity to solve the challenge that you have might have a bigger impact on their decision to join your project. Now, once you have an idea about who you want to work with, whether it's universities or startups or other organizations, before actually start looking for them, we need to take care of legal questions. And I will not stay on this point for long. I'm not a lawyer, but I have to mention it. We need to have agreements in place. We need to understand how we want to work with our partners, what the terms and conditions of our collaboration are. What do we want to give them? Do we want to keep a patent after the project? And if so, under what conditions? And of course, most companies would want to have a patent, and I'm pretty sure that you would like to have it too. So you need to think about that. You need to think about the rights and obligations of each partner. What are you going to do in case of agreement infringement? So you need to work with your lawyers, or you need to work with your intermediary to prepare these agreements. Again, a non-disclosure agreement should be prepared as well, just in case. So yeah, you should think about all these little, actually not so little things, and yeah, you need to be prepared. And one more thing, I just want to say, never save on lawyers in cases of open innovation projects. Don't do that. If you don't have your lawyers in your company, you should find really good ones outside. But yeah, do not try to save on such things. There's actually one point that I completely forgot to mention when I was recording this video, but I think this point is really important. And you also need to choose who from your team is going to participate in this collaborative innovation project. You need to assign certain people to be decision makers, the ones who will be reviewing solutions, who will be reviewing progress, etc. You will need to assign a project manager, of course, from your side, the one who will be responsible for communicating with teams, or if you're working with the intermediary, with the intermediary as well, and who will organize the whole work and just all those things. And you also need to assign, and I believe someone from your decision-making team, you need to assign some of these people as mentors for your collaboration partners. I think this is really important, and I think it will kind of give them more responsibility, and they will feel like they're also responsible for the success of the project. So I think it's really important, especially when it comes to cognitive biases. You need to make people responsible for the success of the collaboration partners they're working with, and thus they will be able to consider and to look at solutions from different angles. Once you have defined those things, you can start looking for the teams, and yeah, you need to get from them the initial solutions for your problem. So when you get in touch with a potential team for your research project, you have to provide them with your requirements, with your challenge, with the criteria. And I think what you need to do is really to ask them to share a presentation on the solution that they can propose, what they have, and they can, of course, they should give you the answer whether they can actually do that, whether you can get what you want from them. It's also good to ask them about which expertise they have in their team, and if they have any prototypes or something to show you on technology you're looking for, that's going to be great too. And I also suggest you having calls with those teams that are ready to provide you with solution ideas. It's quite difficult, in my opinion, to understand the full potential of the team just by looking at their presentation. Moreover, let's be real, researchers are really bad with presentations in most cases. They are not doing quite well. So it's better for you to grasp how good the team is, and the only way to do it is to meet with them either online or offline. And also, when it comes to finding university partners, I have 3 videos, quite long ones, about how to find a university partner. So you can take a look at them and they might help you. I just go through the whole process in detail, how I'm looking for universities when I work with them. I think the link to one of these videos should be somewhere like over here. Now, another thing that I want to mention before we actually get to the process itself, before I start describing the process, is the project infrastructure. In my opinion, preparing infrastructure is an important step that shouldn't be skipped. And we can talk about software infrastructure here, like all the digital tools that you are going to use during the project, and also kind of technical equipment and materials that you might need during the project. And I'm going to start with the software infrastructure. Unfortunately, I know that not all companies pay attention to it. Many rely on emails, and yes, emails are important. It's often the main source of truth, but still, apart from emails, you also need to think about the overall communication and collaboration setup. You have to start with the tools that allow instant messaging. I know a lot of companies use Microsoft Teams, and this tool works well, but in any case, there should be a platform where everyone can actually talk to each other. It will definitely improve the dynamic and help with instant idea exchange. You don't need to write a formal email to just ask a quick question. You have direct access to the person right away, and that's what you need, and that's what's going to help. And it also helps to establish trust between partners. It's easier to trust and connect with someone when you know you can reach out to them anytime, and it really democratizes communication. And I do believe this is extremely important. It makes it easier to exchange ideas, and that's exactly what we need, and that's essential for success. Now, beyond communication, think also about documentation. It makes sense to organize a shared space where you can store and edit project documents together. In our case, we use different tools. The simplest and most obvious one that comes to my mind is Notion for the knowledge base and Dropbox. Both tools are very easy to use. They are flexible and they allow you to share ideas and documents. But again, you probably already have your own space. For example, Microsoft Teams often includes everything you need, so maybe you just can go with this one. In more technical environments, like in the case of one of my friends who works with standards development, they use GitHub a lot. I don't think that that's going to work for everyone, but why not? Just that could be an option too. The main point is you need a platform that allows your partners to collaborate and exchange both ideas and official documents. And you need to see document changes and who made them. So you need to have this tool. Now, also it's good to think about the tool for brainstorming. Like, for example, we use Mira a lot, and there you can have kind of a whiteboard, and you can prepare different templates to share ideas and to organize brainstorming. Now, of course, you need to have a tool for calls, something quite basic and easy to organize, but this is still important. Then, of course, I think you want to use some AI tools, Maybe your company already has some AI tools that can help with the research process or with idea generation. I think that this can be interesting, even if you do not believe that AI can generate real deep ideas in your research area. And I believe that it's definitely not always the case. In many cases, it's not going to be the deepest ideas, of course, but you might still use it as a source of inspiration, and you can ask about idea connections, how to improve solutions that you're working on, Or I don't know, you can think about how to kind of combine these solutions, or just simply get some new angles to look from. And I personally see AI as a source of, like, yeah, again, basic ideas, but yeah, I think that it can give you food for thought and help you sharpen your own thinking. So yeah, we've been talking about software environment and software infrastructure, which are of course important, but in scientific projects, you might also need physical infrastructure, like again, materials and equipment, or like even a dedicated lab. From my experience in one of the projects, the client company bought equipment for all project partners. Every university team involved in the project received the necessary equipment. You don't always need that, but you might think about it and consider whether it's something that would make sense in your specific case. Then, of course, there are materials, something that your partners will need, of course, for the project, for their solutions. And you can either source them from your own suppliers or let the partners buy what they need and know how to work with, and then kind of reimburse them. That's also an option. Apart from them, you might need some additional services, something that I have kind of already mentioned, and something that your collaboration partners will not provide themselves. For example, when it comes to testing, maybe you need to have some testing equipment for all the trials that you need to run. Maybe you do not have it in your lab. And yeah, then you might bring in a company that provides testing services. And here again, you can just either treat them as service providers or kind of even invite them as full collaboration partners, especially if they bring in valuable knowledge and experience. And the same goes for your suppliers. You know, especially if we're talking about material suppliers, you might want to invite them as collaboration partners as well. Okay, the next point that we should cover is the process itself, of course. Well, it's a difficult point for me because there are different models and different frameworks that you can use to work with your collaborative research project, depending on how many partners you have and how long you expect the project to last. At Disruptive, we have more or less standard processes for hackathons. There are a few models. I'll be talking about them in my next video. For collaborative innovation projects, the process is usually simpler, kinda. We have a pre-project stage. Basically, up to this point, that's what I've been talking about. We're getting ready for the project, we're looking for the partner or partners to work with, and we organize all the legal stuff. We do all of that ourselves by also communicating with the client about all these moments. But when it comes to the process for the project itself, it starts with the initial meeting when the client gets a chance to choose who they are going to work with. Of course, the company reviews all the ideas beforehand, but the first introductory meeting is a better way to actually see the potential of all the different teams and their solutions. We can organize more meetings, of course, if necessary. If the decision-making team is uncertain, then, of course, the company makes a decision on the partner or partners to choose, and we start working. During the project, we always organize at least one review meeting in the middle of the process, but in general, we meet regularly to track the progress and brainstorm, find solutions to challenges on the way. And we, of course, have the testing and trial phase. Depending on the project, we might have a number of them on the way. We need to make sure that the solution meets the requirements. And the final meeting, of course, this is also what we have, to review the solutions, to define next steps, what is going to happen with the intellectual property, whether the company is going to continue collaboration with the partner to push the solution to mass production, or whether they are going to stop here, whether they might need new partners, how the commercialization in general can be supported as well. And we, of course, analyze the whole project, analyze mistakes and challenges that we faced, how well they were overcome, etc., etc. But in general, it might be just a very basic process of 3 main steps: the beginning, the middle, and the end of the project. This is something that you might want to implement in your case as well. Working with one team, I believe, gives you more flexibility here, but when you involve a number of partners, it is really important to have at least these 3 official reviews during the process when you invite all of your partners. Just maybe don't get too formal with them. I believe it's much more important to establish an environment where your collaboration partners don't have to wait for the meetings to ask important questions or solve their problems. They should be able to contact you immediately when they have a question or issue. And when it comes to the process, an important thing to remember is that you are working with another organization or team, and they have their own research processes in place. They know how to do their work. Even if you feel like they are not doing something the right way or that they should do something differently, the question is, if you don't trust them, why would you collaborate with them, right? So I wouldn't just be too concerned about their internal research processes. I wouldn't think about it too much. However, it might be a good idea to actually ask them about the processes that they have to make sure there is something actually, and will just make it easier for you to work with them. Also, one thing that I want to add here, if your project is quite long, I would leave the door open to change your research partner or just say goodbye to a partner if needed. You want to trust the team you start working with, but sometimes they just can't provide what you need for objective reasons, or they appear to be not that professional and expert enough. And you might realize halfway that their technology or approach just doesn't fit what you're looking for. So it's good to have an option to make changes, but yeah, there should be this kind of fine balance between just wanting to change the team because you just want it, or some kind of objective reasons to do that. Now, I also want to explain what you need to do at the beginning, middle, and the end of the project. The most important things to remember. And at the very beginning of the project, you need to make sure that everyone understands everything, or well, maybe not everything, but as much as possible. Your collaboration partners, they need to understand the process, the project goals, all the details, the criteria, what they should deliver. You need to share all the information that you can under NDA, of course. And again, the more open you are, the better it is for the project. You need to answer all their questions, and you need to make sure that they understand the terms and conditions, and again, the process. You need to understand their solutions, their ideas, what they're proposing to you, their technologies they work with, and how what they propose might be implemented. You need to review carefully and think about how to improve their submissions. If you're dealing with radical innovation, think about the investments that you might need to make when you're going to implement the solution and whether you are ready for that. If not, this is just something to keep in mind. It doesn't mean that you should say goodbye. What you need to think is just how you can address this point during the project, or whether you need to bring in someone else. So for example, you really like the idea is great, but it's going to be very expensive to implement it in real life. I would recommend to still keep this option in mind and still be open to this solution. But really, if you can just, find the way to make it cheaper. Now, the middle of the process is about understanding if you should continue working with your partner and their solution. So you need to focus on challenges, on their challenges, and how to improve their solution to get what you need at the end of the project. You need to get a clear picture of progress and decide again whether to continue or not. Whether you want to change the partner or you want to stop right here with the project. at all. Maybe you will just realize it's not feasible and further investment won't pay off. This is fine. And also during the middle of the project, you need to do as much collaboration as you can. You should do a lot of brainstorming and you should do a lot of joint activities, because this is the point where you kind of already know each other better and you can easily share and exchange different ideas. Now, at the end of the project, what you need to do is, of course, to test and to evaluate the results. You need to decide if you got what you needed and what solutions you want to patent. Think about what you want to do next, whether you're going to implement the solution yourself, whether you're going to continue working with a partner, or maybe you will invite someone else, another partner, and consider who you want to work with in the future. So, for example, you invited a couple of project partners and one of them stands out and you really want to work with them in the future, why not? This is something to decide right here and invite them for collaboration. You might even want to bring some team members from your collaboration partner into your company, or just to keep some people involved after the project. This is also something to think about. Whether you want to keep in touch with the team or not, that's up to you, of course. Maybe you already have an open innovation network, or maybe you want to organize one. You might want to stay connected with all the teams and all collaboration partners who participate in the project to share thoughts, ideas, and continue exchanging knowledge after the project is over. I also believe this is a great idea, and just to keep in touch because you might need them later. And even if the team did not deliver what you expected this time, they might have something interesting for you in the future, and they might do this next time. So today we have discussed how to organize a collaborative research / innovation / open innovation project. We talked about everything you need to keep in mind when you plan to start one, from choosing the right challenge to finding the teams and organizing your project infrastructure. In general, I would like to remind you that every collaborative innovation project is different. The canvas is more or less clear, but how exactly your process will go depends on so many different factors. That's why at my company, we are staying flexible for such processes, and I believe so should you. But of course, you should always have a plan. By the way, regarding the canvas, as I have mentioned, I have prepared a basic canvas that you can use to organize your thoughts before starting the project. There I mentioned all the things I was talking about in this video, what you need to prepare for your Open Innovation Collaborative Research project. I hope it will be useful. I'm gonna leave the link to this canvas below in the description, so just feel free to copy it and use it whenever you need. And if you are still not sure what you need to do with all of that and just want to have some professional opinion, please let me know. Text me on LinkedIn or leave a comment below. I'll be happy to help. In the next video, I'll be talking about hackathons model. We have a disruptive. They're more structured compared to the collaborative projects. So I hope to see you next time with the next video. I wish you good luck with your innovation projects, whether they are open innovation projects or closed innovation projects. Just hope that you'll get the result that you want. And have a good one, and bye!